The first transmission from space arrived on a Tuesday morning, interrupting breakfast shows across every continent. The message was simple and direct: surrender within 30 days or face complete annihilation. The galactic hegemony had spoken. And Earth had heard. Admiral Corvin watched the blue planet rotate slowly beneath his massive fleet. 3,000 warships hung in perfect formation around Earth like a steel net waiting to tighten. His species had conquered 47 worlds, and each one had followed the same pattern. First came the desperate attempts at communication, then the frantic military preparations, followed by panicked evacuations, and finally the inevitable surrender. But Earth was different. Earth was silent. The communications officer at his station looked puzzled as he monitored the human frequencies. "Admiral, they acknowledge our presence, but they refuse to respond to our demands. No counteroffers, no pleas for mercy, no attempts at negotiation." Corvin nodded with satisfaction. This was even better than he had hoped. The humans were so primitive, so utterly overwhelmed by the sight of his fleet that they had simply given up without a fight. It would make the conquest much easier. Dr. Thane, the fleet's chief xenobiologist, had been studying human behavior patterns for weeks. She found their response fascinating in its complete lack of logic. They continue their daily routines as if nothing has changed, she reported to the command staff. Children still attend schools, workers still report to their jobs, and their entertainment systems still broadcast their primitive shows. Fear can manifest in many ways, Corvin replied. Some species fight desperately before accepting defeat. Others freeze completely, unable to process the reality of their situation. The humans appear to be the latter. Deep beneath the Rocky Mountains, Director Reed studied the same displays that the aliens were watching. The massive underground facility hummed with activity as thousands of personnel worked around the clock. Every screen showed alien vessel positions, every computer calculated firing solutions, and every communication channel coordinated with similar facilities across the globe. "Phase 1 is complete," reported his aide, Major Thompson. "All orbital assets are in position and undetected. Ground-based systems are ready for activation. Personnel insertion teams have reached their designated coordinates." Reed nodded without taking his eyes off the main display. The alien fleet formation was perfect for their purposes. Tight enough to create maximum confusion when the time came, but spread out enough to prevent them from supporting each other effectively. The aliens had positioned themselves exactly where human strategists had hoped they would. "What about the population centers?" Reed asked. "All major cities are maintaining normal operations as instructed. The aliens interpret this as shock or denial, exactly as we planned. They have no idea that every civilian has been briefed and is simply waiting for the signal." The genius of the plan lay in its simplicity. While the aliens expected panic and military buildup, humanity had chosen the opposite approach. Every military base appeared to be operating at normal peacetime levels. Every factory continued producing civilian goods. Every school remained open and functioning. To outside observers, it looked like Earth had simply decided to ignore the alien threat completely, but appearances were deceiving. 3 weeks into the occupation, Lieutenant Cross aboard the observation vessel Meridian began to notice small inconsistencies. Deep space monitoring stations that had been active for decades suddenly went dark. Not destroyed by weapons fire, but simply diet. When investigation teams were sent to check, they found the stations empty but undamaged. "Perhaps the humans are evacuating their outer facilities," Cross suggested to his commanding officer. Captain Torres was not convinced. "Evacuating to where?" "Our sensors show no mass movement of population, no refugee ships, no signs of panic. Anywhere on the planet. If they were evacuating, we would detect it." What Torres could not detect were the modifications that had been made to human technology over the past 5 years. Every piece of equipment, every vehicle, every communication device had been slowly and secretly upgraded with materials that absorbed rather than reflected alien sensor beams. Humanity had not been idle during the years of alien observation. The modifications were subtle but effective. Human ships now moved through space like ghosts, invisible to the detection systems that had successfully tracked every other species. In the galaxy, human facilities could be powered down and reactivated without creating the energy signatures that alien sensors were designed to detect. Most importantly, human personnel could be transported and positioned without alerting the watching fleet. By the end of the third week, Admiral Corvan was beginning to feel uneasy. The complete lack of response from Earth was unprecedented in his experience. Even the most primitive species had attempted some form of communication or shown some sign of preparation for what was to come. "Perhaps we should proceed with the demonstration," suggested his tactical officer, Commander Vale. Destroying one of their cities might shock them into responding, but Corvan hesitated. Something about the situation felt wrong, though he could not identify what. The humans were behaving in a way that contradicted everything he knew about conquered species. Their silence was not the silence of defeat. It was something else entirely. Dr. Thane had been conducting her own analysis of human behavior patterns. What she found disturbed her more than she cared to admit. "Their stress indicators are all wrong," she reported in her daily briefing. When facing extinction, most species show elevated heart rates, increased neural activity, and disrupted sleep patterns. The humans show none of these signs. "What do they show instead?" Corvan asked. "Patience," Thane replied. "They show the biological markers of patience, as if they are waiting for something. The answer to what they were waiting for would come soon enough." In facilities around the world, human technicians were making final preparations. Weapon systems that had been disguised as civilian infrastructure were being brought online. Personnel who had been living normal lives were receiving their activation orders. Ships that had been hidden in asteroid fields and gas giant atmospheres were moving into position. Earth's silence was not surrender. It was the calm before the storm, and the storm was about to break. The breakfast alarm aboard the hegemony vessel Meridian rang at exactly 0600 hours, just as it had every day for the past month. Captain Torres rolled out of her sleeping pod and began her morning routine, unaware that today would be different. From all the others, her first indication that something was wrong came when she reached the bridge and found her communications officer frantically trying to raise 3 escort vessels that had gone silent during the night shift. The ships had been patrolling the outer edge of the fleet formation, maintaining the perimeter that kept other species from interfering with the conquest. "When did we lose contact?" Torres asked, settling into her command chair. "Approximately 300 hours. All 3 vessels stopped responding simultaneously. No distress signals, no indication of trouble. They simply went dark." Torres felt a chill run down her spine. In 30 years of military service, she had never seen 3 ships disappear without any trace of what had happened to them. Are their hulls still intact? Unknown. Long-range sensors cannot penetrate the interference in that sector. We would need to send a search team. The search team consisted of 6 fast attack vessels, each equipped with the most advanced sensors. In the hegemony fleet, they reached the patrol coordinates within 2 hours and found nothing but empty space and debris clouds that sparkled strangely in the starlight. Lieutenant Cross, leading the search team, examined the wreckage with growing confusion. The debris patterns made no sense. The destroyed ships had been cut apart with surgical precision, as if someone had known exactly where to strike to cause maximum damage with minimum energy expenditure. "This was not random destruction," Cross reported back to Torres. "Someone studied our ship designs, learned our weaknesses, and exploited them with frightening efficiency. But who could have done such a thing?" The humans had shown no signs of advanced technology. Their primitive weapons could barely reach their own moon, let alone threaten ships in deep space. Yet the evidence was undeniable. Admiral Corvan received the news with growing alarm. The loss of 3 patrol vessels was serious, but the manner of their destruction was terrifying. His fleet had been designed to fight other spacefaring civilizations, not to defend against an enemy that could strike without warning and vanish without trace. "Double the patrols," he ordered. "I want every sector monitored continuously." "Whatever." destroyed those ships will not catch us unprepared again." But the additional patrols only made the situation worse. By the end of the week, 17 more vessels had vanished. The attacks followed no pattern that Corvin could identify. Sometimes single ships disappeared, sometimes pairs, sometimes entire patrol groups. The only constant was the complete lack of warning before each attack. Colonel West watched the alien fleet's formation begin to deteriorate from his position aboard the stealth vessel Phantom. The human ships were invisible to alien sensors, constructed from metamaterials that had been developed in secret laboratories for exactly this purpose. They moved like predators through the enemy formation, striking at carefully selected targets and vanishing before their prey could respond. "Target acquired," his weapons officer reported. "Alien cruiser designation Hotel 7, shields down, engines disabled. Boarding teams, prepare for insertion," West ordered. The human strategy was not simply to destroy alien vessels, but to capture them intact whenever possible. Each captured ship provided valuable intelligence about hegemony technology and tactics. The boarding operation proceeded with clockwork precision. Human soldiers materialized within the alien vessel's corridors, moving through sections they had studied for weeks using intelligence gathered from previous captures. They struck command centers, disabled weapon systems, and secured valuable equipment. Before vanishing as quickly as they had appeared, Dr. Thane was studying the latest reports when the pattern finally became clear to her. The attacks were not random at all. They were systematic, methodical, and designed to achieve maximum psychological impact while gathering intelligence. Someone was studying the hegemony fleet, learning its capabilities, and preparing for something larger. "They are not trying to destroy us," she explained to Admiral Corvin. "They are trying to understand us. Every attack is a learning experience. Every captured vessel a source of information. We are not facing a primitive species lashing out in desperation. We are facing a sophisticated enemy that has been preparing for this confrontation." Corvin's response was to tighten the fleet formation even further, pulling his remaining ships into a defensive sphere around the flagship. If the humans wanted to study his fleet, they would have to come within range of his weapons to do so, but the tighter formation only made the human task easier. Ships that had been spread across millions of cubic kilometers of space were now clustered together like fish in a net. The invisible human vessels moved through the gaps between alien ships, striking at will and disappearing before their targets could react. The psychological effect on the alien crews was devastating. They could not see their attackers, could not predict when the next strike would come, and could not defend against weapons they did not understand. Fear began to spread through the fleet like a virus, infecting every crew member and undermining the disciplined efficiency that had made the hegemony so successful. Meanwhile, on Earth's surface, the populations that had seemed so obliviously calm began to show signs of subtle change. Workers who had been reporting to factories started arriving at different locations. Students who had been attending schools found their classes relocated to underground facilities. The changes were small and appeared random, but they were all part of a carefully orchestrated plan. The human population was not ignoring the alien threat. They were preparing for the next phase of the operation, a phase that would require every person on the planet to play their part. The aliens had mistaken Earth's silence for surrender, but they were about to learn that silence could be the most dangerous response of all. As the 5th week of occupation began, Admiral Corvin found himself commanding a demoralized fleet that had been reduced to fewer than 2,000 vessels. The humans had not fired a single shot that his sensors could detect, yet they had inflicted more damage than any enemy he had ever faced. "Sir," his communications officer reported, "we are receiving a transmission from Earth." Corvin straightened in his command chair. Finally, the humans were ready to negotiate. Put it through. The transmission was brief and cryptic. "The Watchers have become the watched. Phase 2 begins now." Before Corvin could respond, every screen on his bridge went dark. The emergency lights cast an eerie red glow across the bridge of the hegemony flagship Dominion as Admiral Corvin struggled to understand what was happening to his fleet. The main power systems had failed simultaneously across 17 vessels, and his technical teams could find no explanation for the coordinated shutdown. How many ships are still responding? He demanded of his operations officer. Fewer than 1,800, sir. We have lost contact with another 43 vessels in the past 6 hours. The pattern is accelerating. Dr. Thane burst onto the bridge with a datapad clutched in her hands. Her usual calm demeanor had been replaced by something approaching panic. Admiral, you need to see this analysis of the wreckage we recovered from the patrol vessels. She activated the holographic display, showing a three-dimensional reconstruction of the destroyed ships. The damage patterns were unlike anything in the hegemony's military database. Each strike had been precisely calculated to cause maximum destruction while revealing specific details about the vessel's construction and capabilities. This is not combat damage, Thane explained. This is surgical dissection. Someone has been studying our ships, learning how they work, and testing different methods of destroying them. We are not facing random attacks. We are facing a systematic intelligence-gathering operation. Kovan felt his blood run cold. The humans had not been cowering in fear for the past 5 weeks. They had been studying his fleet, learning its weaknesses, and preparing for something far more dangerous than he had imagined. But how? He asked. Our sensors show no human vessels in the area. No energy signatures, no weapon discharges, no signs of advanced technology anywhere on their planet. The answer came from an unexpected source. Commander Vale, the fleet security chief, had been investigating the mysterious power failures when he discovered something that defied explanation. Sir, we have found evidence of human presence aboard 17 of our vessels. That's impossible. Our shields are active, our hulls are intact, and our transporters would detect any unauthorized material transfer. Vale's expression was grim. They did not transport aboard, sir. They were already here. We found human DNA traces in air filtration systems, food storage areas, and maintenance shafts. Based on the distribution patterns, they have been living within our ships for weeks. The implications hit Corvin like a physical blow. While his fleet had been watching Earth, the humans had been watching his fleet from the inside. They had been breathing the same air, walking the same corridors, and studying every aspect of hegemony technology with the patience of natural predators. How many of our ships are compromised? He asked. Unknown, sir. Possibly all of them. The realization that his entire fleet had been infiltrated sent shockwaves through the command structure. Every ship's captain began conducting emergency security sweeps, searching for signs of human presence. What they found was evidence of a level of preparation that bordered on the supernatural. The humans had not simply snuck aboard the vessels. They had been placed there through a network of sleeper agents and stealth insertions that had been planned for years. Every ship in the fleet contained hidden compartments that had been constructed during routine maintenance operations. Every system had been studied and mapped by human technicians who had been posing as automated repair drones. Colonel West reviewed the intelligence reports from his agents throughout the alien fleet. The psychological impact of the revelation was exceeding all expectations. The aliens had gone from confident conquerors to paranoid prey in the space of a few hours. Phase 2 is proceeding ahead of schedule, he reported to Director Reed. Enemy morale is collapsing faster than we anticipated. They are beginning to fear their own shadows. What about their weapon systems? Reed asked. Disabled or compromised on 70% of their vessels. We have been sabotaging their targeting computers and weapons control systems for weeks. When the time comes for Phase 3, they will be unable to defend themselves effectively. The sabotage had been subtle but devastating. Human agents had introduced microscopic modifications to alien computer systems. Changes so small that they would not be detected by routine diagnostics but would cause critical failures at precisely the wrong moment. Weapons that should have fired would misfire. Shields that should have protected would fail. Navigation systems that should have guided would misdirect. Dr. Thane was conducting her. own investigation into human capabilities when she made a discovery that changed everything. The humans had not developed their advanced technology recently. They had been preparing for this confrontation for decades, possibly centuries. Their technological development does not match their public achievements, she reported to the Emergency Council meeting. While they appeared to be struggling with primitive spaceflight, they were secretly developing metamaterial composites that are superior to our own. While they seemed to be dependent on chemical propulsion, they were actually testing gravitational manipulation systems that make our drives look crude. The evidence was overwhelming. Humanity had been deliberately concealing its true capabilities, allowing the galaxy to believe they were a primitive species, while secretly developing the tools they would need to defend themselves. The silence that the hegemony had interpreted as surrender was actually the patience of a species that had been preparing for war since their first contact with alien civilizations. Admiral Corvin found himself commanding a fleet that was falling apart from the inside. Ships that had been reliable for decades were experiencing system failures at an alarming rate. Crews that had been disciplined and efficient were becoming paranoid and unreliable. The humans had achieved something that no enemy had ever accomplished. They had turned the hegemony's own technology against itself. "Sir," his communications officer reported, "we are receiving another transmission from Earth." This time, the message was longer and more detailed. Director Reed's voice echoed through the flagship's communication system with calm authority. "You came to our world believing that silence meant weakness. You assumed that because we did not immediately respond to your threats, we were incapable of response. You were wrong." The transmission continued. "For 5 weeks, you have been watching our planet, studying our behavior, and preparing for our conquest. During that same time, we have been watching your fleet, studying your technology, and preparing for your defeat. The difference between us is that we have been preparing for this confrontation much longer than you realize." Corvin tried to respond, but his communication systems had been quietly disabled by the human agents aboard his ship. He could receive the transmission, but he could not reply or even terminate the connection. "Your species has conquered 47 worlds," Reed continued. "Each conquest followed the same pattern: overwhelming force, psychological intimidation, and eventual surrender. You expected the same pattern from humanity. Instead, you discovered that we are not like the other species you have encountered. We do not surrender, we adapt." The final part of the transmission was the most chilling. "Phase 3 begins in 24 hours. We suggest you use that time to reconsider your position." As the transmission ended, Corvin realized that his fleet was not hunting a primitive species. They were the prey, and the predator was about to reveal itself. The nightmare began at exactly 0800 hours when every human agent aboard the hegemony vessels received the same coded signal. Phase 3 had begun, and there would be no mercy for those who had threatened Earth with extinction. Commander Vale was reviewing security reports in his office when the lights went out. Emergency power kicked in a moment later, but the damage was already done. In the brief darkness, human infiltrators had moved through the ship's corridors like ghosts, striking at key targets with surgical precision. "Security breach on decks 7, 12, and 15, his aide reported. "Weapons control has been compromised. Engineering reports multiple system failures. We have lost contact with the main computer core." Vale grabbed his weapon and rushed toward the bridge, but the corridors that had been familiar for years now seemed foreign and dangerous. Every shadow could hide an enemy, every sound could signal an attack. The humans had not simply infiltrated his ship. They had claimed it as their own. The attack on the Dominion was even more devastating. Human boarding parties materialized in the most secure sections of the flagship, moving through areas that should have been impossible to access. They struck command centers, disabled weapon systems, and captured key personnel before security forces could respond. Admiral Corvin found himself trapped in his own command center as human soldiers systematically dismantled his fleet's ability to fight back. The attackers moved with terrifying efficiency, as if they had been planning this operation for years. "How are they inside our ships?" he demanded of his security chief. Our shields are active, our hulls are intact, and our internal sensors show no unauthorized personnel. The answer came from an unexpected source. One of the human infiltrators, a woman named Davis, who had been posing as a maintenance technician, stepped out of the shadows with a weapon trained on Corvan's chest. "We are not breaking in, Admiral," she said calmly. "We have been here for weeks, studying your routines, learning your weaknesses, and preparing for this moment. You invited us aboard when you decided to threaten our world." The revelation that humans had been living within the hegemony fleet for weeks sent shockwaves through the surviving crew members. Every routine maintenance operation, every supply, delivery, every seemingly innocent interaction had been part of a carefully orchestrated infiltration plan. Dr. Thane was conducting her final analysis when she realized the full scope of what humanity had accomplished. The humans had not simply placed agents aboard the ships. They had been systematically replacing key personnel, substituting their own people for alien crew members so gradually that nobody had noticed. "They have been replacing us," she whispered into her recording device. "Not killing us, but replacing us. The technician who repaired my computer last week was human. The food service worker who delivered my meals was human. The cleaning crew that maintained my laboratory was human. We have been living alongside them for weeks without knowing it." The psychological impact was devastating. Every interaction the aliens had experienced, every conversation they had held, every routine they had followed had been monitored and recorded by human agents. There were no secrets, no private communications, no secure areas that had not been compromised. Colonel West coordinated the assault from his position aboard the Phantom. The human forces were not trying to destroy the alien fleet, but to capture it intact. Every vessel that could be taken would become part of Earth's growing space navy. Every piece of technology that could be salvaged would advance human capabilities. "Team 7, report status," he ordered. "Bridge secured, Admiral Corvan captured, command codes obtained. The flagship is ours." "Team 12, what about the weapons platforms?" "All primary systems disabled. Secondary systems are being reprogrammed. We will have full control within the hour." The efficiency of the operation was breathtaking. Human forces had been studying the alien vessels for so long that they knew the ships better than their original crews. Every weakness had been cataloged, every vulnerability exploited, every system turned against its creators. The few alien vessels that attempted to fight back discovered that their weapons systems had been sabotaged beyond repair. Targeting computers that should have locked onto human ships instead painted friendly vessels as enemies. Missiles that should have destroyed attackers instead detonated harmlessly in space. Shields that should have protected hulls instead collapsed. Under the lightest pressure, Captain Torres aboard the Meridian tried desperately to organize a counterattack, but her ship's systems refused to obey her commands. Every order she gave was intercepted and redirected by human agents who had been monitoring her communications for weeks. "Fire on the approaching vessels," she ordered her weapons officer. "Weapon systems are not responding, Captain. All control has been transferred to an unknown source." The unknown source was Lieutenant Parker, a human agent who had been working in the ship's engineering section for 3 weeks. He had been studying the vessel's weapon systems, learning their capabilities, and preparing to turn them against their owners when the time came. "Sorry, Captain," Parker said as he stepped onto the bridge with a squad of human soldiers. "Your weapons are now under new management." The capture of the Meridian was typical of what was happening throughout the fleet. Human agents who had been invisible for weeks suddenly revealed themselves, taking control of ships they had been studying from the inside. The aliens found themselves prisoners aboard their own vessels, helpless to resist an enemy they had never seen coming. Dr. Thane made her final log entry as human soldiers escorted her to the detention area. "We came to this system believing we were the apex predators of the galaxy. We discovered instead that we had wandered into the territory of something far more dangerous than we imagined. The humans did not simply resist our invasion. They turned it against us, using our own confidence and assumptions to accomplish what no other species had ever achieved. The final phase of the operation was the most impressive. As the last alien vessels were captured or disabled, the human population on Earth finally began to move, but not in panic or desperation. They moved with the coordinated precision of a species that had been preparing for this moment for generations. Factories that had been producing civilian goods revealed themselves as weapons manufacturing facilities. Schools that had been teaching normal subjects had actually been training centers for military operations. Entertainment systems that had been broadcasting trivial programs had been coordinating a planet-wide defense network. Admiral Corvan, now a prisoner aboard his own flagship, watched in horrified fascination as Earth's true capabilities were revealed. The planet's surface erupted with activity as hidden bases came online. Stealth ships emerged from concealment, and weapon systems that had been disguised as civilian infrastructure began their systematic destruction of any remaining alien forces. "You see," Davis explained to him, "we have been preparing for this day since we first detected your exploration probes 20 years ago. We knew you would come eventually, and we knew you would underestimate us. Your species has a fatal flaw. You assume that silence means surrender. For humanity, silence means preparation." The last transmission from Earth came as the final. Alien vessels were being secured. The galaxy mistook our silence for surrender. Today, you learned the price of that mistake. Humanity has taken its first step into the larger universe, and we will not be stopped. The War Council chamber aboard the captured Hegemony flagship had been transformed into a human command center, where Director Reed stood before a holographic display showing the complete destruction of the alien invasion fleet. 6 weeks after the first ultimatum, not a single enemy vessel remained under alien control. "Final casualty reports," Reed requested from General Park, who had been coordinating the ground operations throughout the campaign. 0 human military deaths, minimal civilian casualties from the initial panic phase. Enemy losses complete. 3,000 vessels captured intact, approximately 2 million prisoners taken, and full access to their technology databases. The numbers were staggering, but they told only part of the story. Humanity had not simply defeated the Hegemony fleet. They had turned it into the foundation of Earth's new space navy. Every captured ship would be studied, reverse-engineered, and improved upon. Every prisoner would be questioned, their knowledge extracted and catalogued. Every piece of technology would be adapted for human use. Admiral Corvan sat in his detention cell, still struggling to understand how his supposedly invincible fleet had been defeated so completely. The humans had not fought a traditional battle. They had orchestrated a campaign of psychological warfare, technological sabotage, and strategic deception that had turned his own forces against him. "You want to know how we did it," Davis said as she entered his cell. She had been assigned to debrief the former admiral, extracting information about other hegemony fleets and the political structure of the galactic government. "Your species had no advanced technology 6 weeks ago," Corvan replied. "You were barely capable of reaching your own moon. How did you develop the capabilities to defeat us so completely?" Davis smiled. "We did not develop them in 6 weeks. We developed them over 6 decades. When our deep space monitors first detected your exploration probes, we knew this day would come. We had time to prepare, and we used that time wisely." The truth was more complex than even Davis revealed. Humanity's preparation had begun with the first radio signals from space, decades before the Hegemony had taken any interest in Earth. Every alien transmission had been analyzed, every probe had been studied, and every piece of evidence about galactic civilization had been used to prepare for eventual contact. "We learned about your species from your own communications," Davis continued. "We studied your conquest patterns, your military tactics, and your psychological profiles. By the time you arrived, we knew more about you than you knew about yourselves." The human intelligence network had been vast and sophisticated. Every alien civilization that had been conquered by the Hegemony had been contacted in secret, their knowledge about alien technology and tactics absorbed into Earth's growing database. Refugee populations had been quietly relocated to Earth, their expertise used to develop countermeasures against hegemony, weapons and defenses. Dr. Thane was conducting her own analysis of human capabilities from her detention facility. The more she learned, the more impressed she became with the scope of their deception. They did not simply hide their technology, she recorded in her scientific journal. They created an entirely false impression of their capabilities while secretly developing systems that are superior to our own. The evidence was overwhelming. While Earth's public space program had struggled with primitive rockets and basic orbital mechanics, their secret military program had developed gravitational manipulation drives that could outperform anything in the hegemony fleet, while their public communications relied on radio waves and fiber optic cables. Their military used quantum entanglement networks that were impossible to intercept or jam. Most impressive of all was their manufacturing capability. The factories that had appeared to be producing consumer goods had actually been building the components for a massive military machine. Every automobile assembly line could be converted to produce armored vehicles. Every electronics factory could switch to manufacturing military computers. Every civilian facility had been designed with wartime production in mind. Colonel West was overseeing the integration of captured alien technology when he received the report he had been waiting for. Sir, long-range sensors have detected 3 additional hegemony fleets approaching from different sectors. Estimated arrival time, 6 months. Excellent, West replied. That gives us time to prepare a proper welcome for them. The approaching fleets represented the hegemony's response to the loss of contact with the Earth invasion force. Each fleet was larger and more heavily armed than the first, designed to deal with whatever primitive resistance had destroyed the original force, but they would not be facing primitive resistance. They would be facing a human civilization that had just absorbed the technology and knowledge of an entire galactic empire. The captured vessels were already being modified with human improvements, their weapons upgraded, their defenses enhanced, and their crews replaced with human personnel who understood the technology better than its original creators. The psychological impact of the defeat was spreading throughout the galaxy. Other species that had been conquered by the hegemony were beginning to question their subjugation. Resistance movements that had been dormant for decades were showing signs of renewed activity. The invincible reputation of the hegemony had been shattered by a species that most civilizations had never heard of. Director Reed was addressing the United Nations when the final phase of the operation began. Today, humanity takes its place among the stars not as conquerors but as liberators. The galaxy has been dominated by fear for too long. It is time for that to change. The first human fleet departed Earth orbit 72 hours later, heading for the hegemony's nearest colonial world. The vessels looked like standard hegemony ships, but their crews were human, their weapons were enhanced, and their mission was to free the enslaved populations that had been suffering under alien rule. The liberation of Kepler Prime took less than 18 hours. The hegemony garrison, expecting a routine supply convoy, instead found themselves facing a human fleet that knew every weakness in their defenses. The orbital platforms that should have protected the planet were turned against their creators. The ground forces that should have maintained order were captured or eliminated by human special forces who had been studying their tactics for months. The freed population of Kepler Prime was given a choice: join the growing human alliance or remain neutral. Most chose to join, adding their own knowledge and capabilities to the expanding coalition. Within weeks, the Human Liberation Force had grown from a single fleet to a multi-species armada dedicated to ending hegemony rule. Admiral Corvan watched the reports from his prison cell with growing amazement. "They are not simply replacing us," he said to Davis during one of their sessions. "They are creating something entirely new." "That was always the plan," Davis replied. "The hegemony ruled through fear and intimidation. We rule through cooperation and mutual benefit. The species you conquered are joining us willingly because we offer them something you never did: freedom." The final irony was that the hegemony's own actions had made their defeat inevitable. By conquering so many worlds, they had created a galaxy full of species with reasons to hate them. By ruling through fear, they had ensured that any alternative would be welcomed. By underestimating humanity, they had given Earth the time and motivation needed to organize the largest rebellion in galactic history. 6 months after the first ultimatum, the three approaching hegemony fleets encountered not a primitive human civilization, but a coalition of liberated worlds led by Earth's growing space navy. The battle that followed was not a conquest but a liberation. As species after species joined the human cause and turned against their former oppressors, the galaxy would never be the same. The age of the hegemony was over, ended not by superior firepower, but by superior strategy. Humanity had proven that silence was not surrender, that patience was not weakness, and that the most dangerous enemy was the one who had been underestimated. The price of underestimation had been total defeat, and the galaxy had learned a lesson that would echo through the ages. Never mistake humanity's silence for surrender. As Earth's ships spread across the galaxy, liberating world after world, a new age began. An age where cooperation replaced conquest, where diversity was celebrated instead of suppressed, and where the quiet species from the small blue planet showed the universe that sometimes the greatest strength comes from knowing when to remain silent and when to strike. The hegemony had come to Earth expecting an easy victory. Instead, they had awakened something far more dangerous than they could have imagined: humanity's determination to ensure that no species would ever again face the choice between surrender and extinction. The galaxy mistook Earth's silence for surrender, and in doing so they had sealed their own fate.